Welcome back, everybody, to the Fantasy Golf Bag Podcast. I'm your host, Redkacheek, and this evening I will be bringing to you the preview for the Shriners Hospitals for Children's Open, played at TPC Summerlin out there in Las Vegas, Nevada. Pretty interesting field this week, actually pretty strong for a fall swing event. Got Brooks in the field, Cantley, kind of like last week. Bryson DeChambeau, your defending champion, Webb Simpson, Adam Scott, Tony Finau coming back from overseas. So a pretty good field there. Actually, Hideki, Gary Woodland, yeah. So pretty strong field for a little, fourth week of the fall swing. Not a very, exciting golf course. It's exciting from the birdies and the eagles, but it's not like a very noteworthy golf course. It's going to be pretty easy for these guys. But we'll certainly dive into the golf course and kind of figure out what we need to target for our players this week. As I said last week, I'll be doing these solo for the most part this fall swing. Might have a couple guest hosts on, and as Euro, if they have any breaks, I actually haven't checked the schedule. Axis is taking care of the Euro content while Skylar is handling the PGA Tour stats and the Euro stats. So we'll see if there's any breaks there, then Axis will definitely hop on here and we can do a co-host show. But for right now, obviously focusing on these, fall swing events, hitting the content, hitting the stats. And I know a lot of people are kind of tuned into NFL, NBA is right around the corner. So a lot of fun stuff in store. But I'll be driving tonight's show solo, and we can go ahead and dive into the Shriners Hospital. Actually, before we get into that, we have to talk about last week a little bit. Sorry, Nick. Not going to touch on it too much, but there's several seasons that are taking part currently. Season number 1, Daniel Berger season. It's currently occurring. And season number 2, the whole Cameron Champ deal. I know we had this discussion in Slack a little bit. It went several different ways. I kind of dismissed him as far as how he won last year's event, gaining 9 strokes putting, and then after that he really fell off the deep end a little bit and really struggled the whole year. And last week, added motivation or not, he played super impressive, drove the ball really, really well, lapped the field pretty much off the tee, and he didn't really putt lights out. Short game was okay. He scrambled okay, but there was a couple of those shots on Sunday for sure. A little bit sketchy. But overall, it was a pretty impressive finish and pretty impressive win for him. So I think I wouldn't say it's a Cameron Champ season, but that was impressive. I'm hoping that this kind of continues. He's in the field this week. He's one of the guys that probably will pop for you, looking at stats that fit this golf course, as well as obviously recent form with him coming in with some good form during last week's event. But it's pretty much it from last week. Not a ton to take away, obviously pretty low scoring. It was fun to kind of see Adam Hadwin. He played pretty well. A lot of the Canadians played well. Shout out to Notorious and STL Cards. You got Nick Taylor, Corey Connors, Roger Sloan, and Adam Hadwin finishing second. All 4 of those guys finished inside the top 20. Should have stacked my Canadians last week. But yeah, excited. Obviously, we talked about Berger and a couple of the fades worked out well. Unfortunately, did not have any Cameron Champ, and a couple of these other guys kind of came out of nowhere, to be honest. Leishman was out of nowhere, Zach Blair out of nowhere. If you look at his last couple showings, I was starting to get pretty low on him coming off a good finish to the Korn Ferry Tour. And man, it really seemed like he's destined to be a Korn Ferry Tour player. Because you play decent on the Korn Ferry Tour and you come to the PGA Tour and just show something. That's why Scotty Scheffler, Robbie Shelton, there's another season for you. Those are the guys that come out to the PGA Tour and immediately they impress and they get those finishes and set themselves up for the entire year. That's really impressive to me, but it's disappointing for sure watching Zach Blair struggle, a couple of these other guys from the Korn Ferry Tour struggle. But they'll have their good finishes. They'll have their ups and downs for sure. And this is a good course for the Korn Ferry Tour guys. This will set up very similarly to those courses that they play, where it's heavy on the drivers, make a ton of birdies. Would not be surprised to see some of these longer shots have a chance this week. So that's enough about last week. Again, apologies to Nick and everyone else who hates to talk about last week's event, but a couple of thoughts there. Nothing too groundbreaking, but the key points, obviously, Daniel Berger's season, Adam Long's season, and we're waiting on the Cameron Champ season. We'll see where that kind of pans out. And then apparently it's injury season with these guys hurting themselves and bouncing back in a big way. So let's go ahead and transition into the Shriners Hospital for Children's Open. Played at TPC Summerlin. This is a par 71, 7,255 yards. It does play at a little bit of elevation. So again, there's not enough elevation for me to weigh anything. This isn't like Mexico for the WGC. There we talk about these big elevation changes. There's certain guys that fit characteristics for the mountains that really play well in altitude, because it is a lot to do with controlling your distance. Out here in the desert, guys are just going to be pounding driver. Like last year, looking at driving distance, this was one of, I think, the 7th easiest on tour, averaging 310 yards off the tee. Like I said, it's pretty wide open. Not a lot of penalty from the fairways. It's one of the highest green and regulation courses. So instead of bouncing around, let me kind of read through a couple of these key stats, because you'll kind of get a better picture of the golf course and who you're trying to target. Obviously, with driving distance being at 310 yards on average, again, somewhat due to the elevation, but guys are just able to pound drivers. Usually you see that long distance and you want to check the driving accuracy, and they kind of go hand in hand. So like when you look at driving accuracy, it's down. It's kind of middle, maybe probably just exactly middle of the pack for the PGA Tour average, just south of 65% driving accuracy. So not bad, but it's definitely not hard to hit fairways. It's not easy to hit fairways either with them pounding drivers. So then you kind of get a picture of that with them hitting their tee shots, and you say, okay, well, there must be an advantage for them hitting drivers into the rough. Let's check the green and regulation number. And then you come to the green and regulation number, and you see it at 74.1%. It's really high. I mean, that was 8th easiest on tour last year. That gives you your picture right there. I mean, guys are able to pound driver. If they miss the fairway at a 60, we'll say they're only hitting 65% of fairways, they're still hitting 74% of their greens and regulation. So it's certainly an advantage off the tee. We had our Fantasy Golf Bag Twitter account. You can follow us at Fantasy Golf Bag on Twitter. And we took a snapshot of the top 10 leaders off the tee from last year's event. And, lo and behold, Cameron Champ led the field by quite a ways. But as we go down the list of the top 10 players strokes gained off the tee, it's pretty interesting to see where they fell on the leaderboard. Like this, I mean, we'll talk about key stats here in a second, and approach and green regulation, all that stuff is going to be important every single week. But off the tee, this is certainly going to set up similar to last week's event. So looking down this list, off the tee in the 2019 Shriners tournament, Cameron Champ led the field, finished T28. Patrick Cantley was second off the tee and finished second in the event. Jonathan Vegas was third off the tee and finished 28th in the event. And then you get a good mix here of Aaron Wise finished 15th, Joaquin Niemann finished 10th, Bryson won the event, Denny McCarthy finished 15th, Sung J M finished 15th, and Sam Ryder finished third. So like you can kind of see where if you were to look at that same leaderboard with approaches outside of Bryson, who won the event, it'd be a very mixed bag. But off the tee certainly contributed quite a bit to gaining strokes on the field for this golf course. So keep an eye on that. Looking at key stats for the event, I don't see, like it's pretty standard. I tried to dial in a few proximities. Obviously, we'll have the EAP numbers up on the website probably tomorrow, being Tuesday. I'm re-recording on Monday night. So I'll be looking at that, trying to get a picture of these guys and how they're going to fare on these projected distances. But pretty simple. I mean, looking at 125 to 150 yards, and for proximity, looking at strokes gained off the tee, strokes gained approach. I'm not weighing green regulation this week. I feel like with a number that high, green regulation isn't a priority. I usually like to weigh that on average PGA Tour courses where, hey, did someone gain strokes or did someone gain greens in regulation on the field last week going to this course like Pebble Beach? That's who I kind of want to eyeball. But on a course where the greens are going to be easy to hit, there's really not a big advantage to just green in regulation. That's why I bring in proximity. That's why I bring in EAP a bit. So keep an eye on that. No driving distance. Again, strokes gained off the tee will encompass that. But birdie or better is going to be pretty big this week. Like looking at last year's event, the top of the leaderboard, kind of in that same breath with the driving distance, the worst birdie number of the top 10 was Robert Streb. He only had 17 birdies for the week, but he also had 2 eagles. All these other guys at the top, Bryson had 22 birdies and an eagle. Patrick Cantlay had 26 birdies. Sam Ryder, 24 birdies and an eagle. Ricky Fowler, 21 birdies and 2 eagles. And Abraham Answer had 24 birdies. So that's like 4.3 birdies per round on average was what the PGA Tour scored it as. But that's big. I mean, you definitely want to be looking at birdie makers on this golf course. They all average about a bogey and a half per round. So there'll be some bogeys to be made, but birdies are going to be big, especially if they're pounding driver. Be looking for that. And there's going to be a mix there. I mean, like you're not going to be able to find someone that's been making 20 birdies in every event they've been playing. So the weighted birdie or better number comes in pretty handy because you can get a feel for, maybe last week someone averaged 5.2 birdies per round, and just because everyone else was averaging 5 birdies per round, he really didn't gain much on the field. But maybe someone played a tougher golf course, made 3.3 birdies per round on a course where everyone was averaging 1.5. That's a pretty big gap there. So the weighted birdie or better number will be big for me this week as well. So that kind of hits the strokes gained off the tee, approach, proximity, and then pulling in those birdie or better numbers with the extended approach that we have on the website. So that'll be kind of my package. Again, I'll be looking at longer term form and short term form, trying to get a feel for these newer guys. Like I said, I think they'll have a good opportunity this week, but there's a lot of win equity at the top of this pricing, which we'll get into here in a minute. But this is probably closest to one of our more normal weeks that we'll see throughout the 2020 season as far as pricing goes. I mean, you got normal guys in the mid 7s and you got studs over 10K. So not going to hit on the golf course anymore. I know you guys are itching to hear some thoughts on guys throughout the pricing. So let's go ahead and dive into the pricing, starting with, we'll just hit DraftKings, starting with 10K and up, working our way down. What do we got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 guys priced at 10K and up. Brooks Koepka in the field at 11.7. Patrick Cantlay at 11.1. Bryson DeChambeau, last year's winner, at 10.7. Webb Simpson at 10.2. He's got the most history at this golf course over the years. And Adam Scott at 10K even, coming off of last week's finish. Never played this event, so it'll be interesting to see kind of what people do with this top tier here. For me, my initial looks, it was pretty tough. Bryson DeChambeau winning last year and 7th the year before, like that looks really good. And you look at Patrick Cantlay, 2nd last year and 1st in 2017, also looks pretty good. And even Brooks has 2 top 5s here in the last 5 years. He played back in 2014 and 2016 and finished 4th and 2nd. He's got a missed cut in 2013 and 2015. So for me, I think it's just going to be going down to Cantlay. Not really impressed with, say, Adam Scott. I mean, he was my first kind of gut play, I guess, right when I saw pricing come out. But he lost like 4.5 strokes off the tee last week. He's a pretty good driver. So I don't anticipate that being a big concern moving forward. But like over this price, I think Adam Scott has some value at 10K. But Patrick Cantlay at 11.1 sticks out the most to me. I mean, you look at his finishes. His last couple of finishes have been like very mediocre, making the cut but finishing 20th. Finished 21st of the Tour Championship in a small field. Finished 40th last week in a weak field. He tends to gain strokes off the tee, tends to gain strokes on approach, and he's just been so consistent with the 2nd place and the 1st place here at this course. He's my first lean, like right off the bat. I know this ownership in this level tend to get spread out pretty well. Like Brooks Brooks' form always looks good as far as his finishes, but his stats never line up. Even going into majors, it's very tough for me to nail Brooks. It's just like kind of picking your spots. And generally when he's lower owned is a great spot to get him. But for me, 10K and up, it's pretty simple. I'm not going to be touching DeChambeau. If Cantley's ownership gets crazy at 11-1, then yeah, it'd probably be worth a fade. But to me, looking through his numbers, he rates out in the top 5 for me in both short-term and long-term. And at 11-1, I really don't feel like that's crazy with his finishes and results here. But he crosses both of the spectrums that I want off the tee and approach. He's not just doing it in one category. So Patrick Cantley for me for sure. Over 10K would be my primary target there this week. All right, so as we move into the 9K range, this will be another one of the players in this range is going to be another one of the seasons that I think I forgot to mention at the top of the show. It is full-fledged Morikawa season. I'm fully on board. I think he is probably as good as Hovland. I think he's better than Wolff. You can consider that a hot take or a cold take, depending on where you stand on this, like the big three coming out of school. But Morikawa's the real deal. I mean, he's been playing really well, showing up week after week. Like the only bad stint he had was towards the end of last season when he was able to qualify for the FedEx Cup playoffs with limited starts. And he just played so much golf. And when he got into the Northern Trust and the BMW, he just struggled. Not concerned with that. You look at how he played last week, gaining almost 6 strokes on approach, gained a stroke off the tee, finishing 10th. And that was after starting off really poorly, and then he got himself right back into contention. And you kind of, if you followed last week's event, you could see the trend with some of those guys. Like Justin Thomas did the same thing, and people consider Justin Thomas, one of the best in the world, obviously. Morikawa is not that far behind. For him to bounce back in that big way and finish in the top 10, really impressive. So he's going to be one of my top targets here, 9,500. One of the interesting things, like he won the Barracuda, which is out here in the desert as well at elevation. So it might be worth considering looking at how guys have fared at the Shriners and the Barracuda. A lot of times there's overlap in the field because the Barracuda is like an alternate field event. This one being in the fall swing has always been a weaker field event. So you'll get a lot of the same guys, but we saw the same thing with, Robert Streb playing well in Reno, and he's played well here at Shriners. There's something to be said for guys that play well in elevation, kind of like I mentioned, looking a little bit deeper at the WGC Mexico. I'm not diving in as deep this week, but feel free to get a little bit creative trying to figure out some of these comp courses, not just on design, but also on the elevation. But yeah, Colin Morikawa will be number 1 for me in this range. To talk on a couple of these other guys, like Hideki's been losing strokes off the tee for a little over a month now. So I'll probably be fading him. I know he missed the cut last week and I was on him. But like when you look at the golf course and how they change, this course looks like it's going to suit the heavy drivers a bit better. Finau right above him kind of fits that mold. But if we look at his results last week with our European Tour stats, he didn't gain very much off the tee. So I think he'll probably be in my player pool, him and Adam Scott both. But neither one, talking about Finau specifically, he's not like on paper, it looks like a great spot for him to play out here in the desert. This is where he won the big, I think it was like $3 million or $2 million in the big desert pro. It's like the big pro game. It was like the I forget what it was called, the best pro game or the all-star pro game, something like that. And it was him and his brother, and they won like $3 million back in probably 2004, 2005, something like that, out here in Vegas. So that's besides the point. That's not going to be a reason to play him. But we know he's a good driver of the golf ball. We know his irons are pretty good, and he's due to win one of these events sometime soon, you would hope. So he's definitely on my list. I am not overly excited. I'm kind of hoping he draws a bunch of ownership and I can fade him and feel pretty good about it. Just because of his European Tour stats last week with a decent finish, his numbers for this golf course don't really line up. But for me, yeah, Morikawa at 9,500 is going to be my big one. I'm probably going to have some Cameron Champ. So work your cut. I will go ahead and take some shares of Cameron Champ at 9,300. Again, this golf course for his driver, if he's playing well, hopefully he stays in the field with his grandfather fighting some stuff. But yeah, Cameron Champ and Morikawa are going to be my top targets there. Definitely Morikawa. He would probably, if I was building 3 lineups, he would probably be in 2 of the 3, if not all 3. And then Cameron Champ would probably just make one of them, just to get a reference for how I feel about those 2. Moving down into the 8K range, it's got guys like Dylan Fratelli, 8,900, Scotty Scheffler, 88, Ches Reavie, Jason Kokrak, Charles Al III, Lucas Glover, JT Poston, Matthew Wolff making a reappearance, Andrew Putnam, and Cameron Smith. Not sure if it's very helpful to read out every single name. I am definitely not going to do that when we get to the 7K range, but being a solo host, it's not as fun just kind of tossing around names. So looking at guys in this tier here, it's going to be kind of the same sentiments from the last couple weeks. Scotty Scheffler, 8,800. It's going to be maybe not Scheffler's season, but it's going to be pretty close. Scotty Scheffler is playing awesome. He's played really well in the Korn Ferry Tour, obviously. When he got off the Korn Ferry Tour, his first couple of events here on the PGA Tour has been pretty solid. I mean, you look at, starting at the Greenbrier, he finished 7th. Then he hopped over to the Sanderson Farms and finished 16th. Gained 11 strokes tee to green at the Greenbrier. Gained 3.5 last week at Sanderson. Was able to gain strokes putting, which helped him. But yeah, I mean, he's a really good player. I don't know where people stand on understanding a lot of these younger guys that had really good, college careers, and besides like the ones that you see on the Golf Channel, like Matthew Wolff and Hovland. But Scotty Scheffler's up there, and he's going to be one of the big players, like a Justin Thomas, Ricky Fowler here soon. So keep a lookout for him. I'm going to keep plugging him in anytime he's sub 9,500, 9,400, depending on the field. Scotty Scheffler for sure. Some other names in this range that kind of stand out to me. Jason Kokrak is definitely going to be one. Has a terrible history here, but as we kind of talked about all of last season, that was kind of a reoccurring theme, is Jason Kokrak's just been different. And it's kind of been no surprise. Like, he struggled at the Greenbrier. He lost 3 strokes putting to miss the cut. But if you look at his finishes even leading into that offseason, before the Greenbrier, he finished 6th at the Wyndham, 12th at the Northern Trust, 19th at the BMW, and 14th at the Tour Championship, gaining strokes off the tee in every event, gaining strokes on approach on every event, everything except for the BMW. He lost about 2 strokes on approach. Really not a big deal. So yeah, Kokrak here, very average to bad course history in my opinion. I mean, he's got miscuts, he's got some really average finishes, but I think he's just a different player, and we know his driver is a strength of his game. I would be very comfortable kind of plugging in a Jason Kokrak this week on this golf course with how well he's been playing. A couple other ones here. I think Matthew Wolff is going to be interesting. A lot of it's based on ownership. I do like Matthew Wolff, so I know I give Skylar a hard time about some of the young guys coming up, but I do like Matthew Wolff quite a bit. I try to look at ownership for him just because I feel like he's been more hyped up based on the name more than a lot of these other younger guys. So I try to stay in tune with that. The other guy that I am interested in, though, is JT Poston. JT Poston has come in, was able to get some shares of him. I think it was at the Sanderson Farms event, kind of under the radar, and I think he was 9,300, something like that. He gained, 8 strokes tee to green, finished 11th, and he finished, to finish the season, he finished 16th at the BMW. And obviously, he got his first win on the PGA Tour at the Wyndham this year. So I do like him. I mean, he's a good driver of the golf ball. Averages, probably above average off the tee, driving distance-wise. And then in elevation, obviously, you add a little bit to that, probably 3%. So, yeah, JT Poston for me is going to be one. Been putting really well, which, again, I've kind of brought this up on all of our live streams, talking about showdowns and stuff like that. There's been a tendency with these guys, especially when the masses in DFS golf, they'll they'll just look for the guy losing strokes putting and then just plug them in. Now, there's something to be said for looking for the ball striking, and if they're losing strokes putting, then that's kind of like a bonus because they're probably going to be priced down because their finishes aren't good, and eventually they're hopefully going to gain some strokes putting, and it's going to pay off for you. But like a guy like Posted, who's been gaining strokes putting for like 5 straight events, there's nothing wrong with targeting that. His ball striking numbers line up. He's a good fit for this golf course. No issues kind of going back here. He's got, again, mixed results. I would probably say a little bit better than Kokrak, but he's got a miscut, a fourth, and then a miscut, fourth back in 2017. So at least you see a little bit of upside there, but that's probably my favorite GPP play this week at 8,300. I just don't see how he gets a lot of ownership in that tier around guys like Wolf, Kokrak, Scheffler, Charles Howell, even off of last week's performance. So keep an eye on the 8K range. I think that'll be a very interesting spot to see where leverage with ownership, what kind of leverage you can get with ownership this week. All right, now we'll hit the 7K range. It's a little bit interesting as far as looking at the European tour, some of these guys that came from overseas. We'll talk about them. And some guys just getting priced down. And I'll kind of start right at the top of the top end of this range. Some names that really stood out to me. And again, there's something to be said for this fall swing, leveraging kind of the relaxed player pools a little bit. But Bubba Watson at 7,900. I just posted something in our Slack chat about it because TPC courses and Bubba Watson tend to get along. I am not sure. Again, Monday, not going to be a ton of talk today. But I'd be curious to see where people fall on him. Like his form going into these wins is never really that good, and even into like good finishes. But one thing for sure, he's a good driver of the golf ball. He sprays it a little bit, works it left and right, but off the tee is his strong suit. And going to a course where we've seen off the tee being a big advantage. Also seeing he's been out in Vegas for about a month, or not a month, probably 2 weeks now, getting ready, visiting the ping fitting, getting stuff dialed in at elevation. And that's not to say he's going to go out and play well, but I think it's really interesting to play some of these guys with obviously higher talent levels than the people priced around them, but they just haven't shown anything of late, and that'll be some of the guys that I target here. So Bubba Watson will definitely be the first one that I'll touch on there. He's not going to be like a huge amount of exposure, but certainly going to be in my player pool. Going down the list, some of my favorites for sure. Aaron Wise at 7,500 is, I shouldn't dare say a mistake, but it's going to be a mistake for me, I guess, because I'm going to be playing a decent share of Aaron Wise at 7,500. Very consistent. Just has not been doing it very well as far as his scoring. But I have no problem kind of going back to Aaron Wise after even his last couple finishes. He's played the Shriners 3 times. He finished 10th in 2016, 32nd in 2017, and 15th in 2018. He's gained strokes off the tee in 5 straight events. His last 2 events, he gained strokes on approach. So he's trending in the right direction. I think he's definitely one of my favorites to make it through the cut. And as we've seen the last couple weeks, that cut line, T65 and ties is getting kind of gnarly some weeks. So I think finding these value pieces down here that have upside to contend, but they should be pretty safe with their numbers to get through the cut line. Aaron Wise for sure is going to be one of them. Going down, I don't think I had anyone above him to touch on. Yeah, going just below him. So Sebastian Munoz, I'm going to go ahead and reverse jinx this one, but he continues to impress, and now he gets priced down here at 7,400. His stats have been great. Obviously, somewhat in contention last week before faltering and finishing 33rd. But his first 3 starts of the 2020 season is 7th, 1st, and 33rd. Gained, 2 strokes off the tee at the Greenbrier, 4 strokes off the tee at the Sanderson, and also 4 strokes off the tee at the Safeway. So playing really well. His ball striking looks good. It's it's almost like a trap down here, to be honest. That's kind of my impression, but I don't know how you kind of avoid it. He seems like he's playing really well. This course suits him from a birdie making standpoint, and he's obviously driving the ball pretty well. So a lot of things check the box for Sebastian Munoz. I don't see any point in kind of hopping off of him this week. As I alluded to, as far as some of the Europeans coming back from the European tour that played the Dunhill Links, Tom Lewis is priced down here. He finished 5th last week, tying with Tommy Fleetwood, Jordan Smith, you may not know, a shot ahead of Luke Donald and Tony Finau. So I think he's a really interesting one, and he is priced down here at 7,300. I'm not sure how many people will recognize his name, and if you're looking at PGA Tour stats only, there's not going to be a ton of data on him. And if memory serves me correctly, I think Sky pointed out that the stats that we have on Tom Lewis for just the PGA Tour is bad. And not bad data, but like his numbers have been bad. But when you start incorporating the Korn Ferry Tour stats and the European Tour stats, Tom Lewis has been playing pretty well, obviously winning the Korn Ferry Tour Championship. So I think he's a really interesting one at 7,300. Certainly going to have some exposure to him. And then right below that, I didn't dig in as much, but I know Skyler is already on board. Lucas Beauregard for this golf course. Saw him play at the match play in Austin, Texas. Good driver of the golf ball long. It's kind of hard to see how he's been playing. He finished 23rd last week over there at the Alfred Dunhill Links, so not too bad of a showing. But again, he's another one. It's going to be kind of under the radar, pretty good sleeper pick if you're trying to look for some guys that really, honestly, they have chances to finish in the top 5, top 10, and not many people are probably going to play them. So Tom Lewis and Lucas Beauregard are the two from overseas that I'd be interested in playing. Going down below that, Johnson Vegas at 7,200 I think is fine. And then Mr. Daniel Berger season, first one off the bat. Really excited for him to have been able to get through the cut last week. I know between him and Vaughn Taylor, I had the highest exposure. And Vaughn Taylor, I think he was 4 under par on Thursday. I think he shot 4 under on the front 9. And then he made a 9 on like hole 12. And then ended up +1 and snuck to the cut. Like, unbelievable, man. But Daniel Berger was in the same boat. He played awesome. For the most part, tee to green until that last day. Going to be riding that one. He has played the Shriners only once back in 2014, kind of right after he got out of school, and missed the cut. So not paying too much attention to that as far as course history. And that'll probably do it for the 7K range. I think I have a little bit of interest at Sam Ryder, Martin Laird, but not a ton. I think that's probably going to be it for the most part. As we do go down into the 6K range, there's a couple guys that stand out right off the bat. 6,900 Robbie Shelton and 6,900 Bronson Burgoon. Robbie Shelton, obviously, I'm going to be playing quite a bit this year. And he impressed me last week and had, I'd say a pretty poor week with his irons, but still managed to get it around decent. And same with Bronson Burgoon. He had the one bad round on Thursday, and then he bounced back really well on Friday, but still had to miss the cut. So Bronson Burgoon, definitely like him. Terrible course history, but I'm not too concerned. I feel like he's definitely in a different mindset this year. And Robbie Shelton was the other one. Definitely going to be playing some Robbie Shelton this week. Good driver of the golf ball. If he can turn his irons around a little bit, he'll be in good shape. But don't be afraid to go back to Bronson for the after the missed cut last week. The others down here is not a ton that kind of pop off for me. I think I have some interest in Charlie Hoffman. Charlie Hoffman's interesting. He's got some missed cuts at the Shriners. He has a 4th way back in 2013 and finished 18th back in 2017. His last couple finishes have been pretty mixed. I can't say he's trending in the right direction. Technically he is trending in the right direction, but he's burned me so many times this last year. I'm not sure I can really stand by him and feel great about it. But I'll probably have some exposure. I think he's just too cheap. I mean, that's essentially what that is a price thing. Any other interesting ones down here in the low, we'll say the mid and low 6K range? I mean, there's a couple guys like Zach Blair coming off of last week. It's interesting just to see if you can grab them for 2 weeks. I know he gained a bunch of strokes putting, but sometimes they can turn that into something a little bit more. Same with Roger Sloan and Andrew Landry. Like, those are two guys. Sloan gained 6 strokes, tee to green last week, finished 13th. And Andrew Landry is another one. I just think he's too cheap in this field. He gained 4.5 strokes, tee to green at the Safeway, finished 23rd, and only has one showing at the Shriners, miscut. So I think there's a lot of good names down here. Like, this is probably the first week where it feels like normal roster construction. Like, there's a lot of cheap guys. Like, I'm down here at the bottom right now, and none that really pop off for me. But I mean, you got Max Homa, Mackenzie Hughes, Sepp Straka, Kurt Kitayama, Christopher Ventura. These guys are all like 6,200, and you can definitely be able to fit some of these guys in, feel pretty good about it, and maybe fit in a Cantley with an Adam Scott or a Brooks with a Webb Simpson, whatever you want to do. There's plenty of value for you to do whatever you want with your lineups this week. I don't know if this is good pricing or bad pricing, but yeah, there's nothing wrong with starting down there. Yeah, and I think the last one, kind of in that same breath, real quick before we get out of here, is Bronson Burgoon missed the cut last week. In overall, played fine, like tee to green. Doc Redwin's kind of in the same boat, so 6,500 for him. I am perfectly fine jumping back on board with Doc Redman this week, and that'll probably do it, guys. I don't know if I think Axis was writing up an article for the course. I don't know if we'll pop any plays in that, but that'll be available on the website, fantasygolfbag.com. But yeah, this is exciting. This is a pretty good field. This is much more exciting than the last couple for sure. So enjoy your research this week. Enjoy your, sweating your lineups. Hopefully you guys are having fun with football season and NBA right around the corner. And like I said last week, if not the last couple weeks, we appreciate you staying on board during the fall swing. We know these are like the hardcore times for the PGA DFSers. So appreciate you guys hanging in there. Euro Tour stuff will be posted online as well. So if you guys are double hardcore on the Euro DFS, that'll be available. And like I said, we appreciate you. If you want to use the fall promo, you can use Fall 19 to purchase the VIP membership for the same price as the PGA membership, which gets you access to both the European Tour stats and stat model and the PGA Tour stats, stat model, and the EAP data that we provide in Excel every single week for you. So appreciate you guys always tuning in to the Fantasy Golf Bag podcast. If you could, leave us a rating and a review on iTunes or wherever you are listening to your podcasts. I'll be around. You can find me on Twitter at Redkacheek. And good luck in your contest this week, guys. Excited. And we'll be looking for those screenshots. See ya.